Hi everyone, welcome to this very first session of critical reasoning. I hope all of you are all excited and waiting to start. Give me a few minutes because we've got a few more people who are joining and we'll start off in just a couple of minutes. Until then, I would love to hear from those of you who have joined. Can you let me know how your prep is going? Have you started your prep? Have you taken any tests so far? Let me know. Or at least if you could let me know if you can hear my voice, because all the silence usually bothers me. Can you all hear my voice? Is someone there? Let me know. So for those of you who have joined, I would love to know if you have started your prep. How is your prep going on? Have you managed to take any tests? Are you having any problems in certain areas? All right. So let's start off. We've got those of you who want to join, they've joined in. So let's start off. Let me start off by saying today's session is all about critical reasoning. It is about one section of critical reasoning, one particular kind of question of critical reasoning. Let's look at all of that later. Let me start off by introducing myself. Hi, everybody. I hope you all can see my screen clearly. I hope you can see me clearly. Let me start off by saying hi, warm welcome to everybody. My name is Nitha. I want to start off by just giving a small little bit about me, just for you to know who I am, what I do. My name is Nitha Jayachandran, as I said, and I am the mentor here, a verbal mentor here at Prepathon. As a matter of fact, I'm the head of the verbal department, and I was a copywriter for several years, and I quit all of that, and I decided to take up teaching, which is something that I love, and I've been doing this for, I would say, about a decade and a half or so. So you're in perfectly safe hands. So today, my intention is to not make this session a class kind of a session, more about trying to approach critical reasoning in a very logic-based manner. That's the intention of today's session, right? So I'd like to start off by looking specifically at one particular type of critical reasoning question, which is weaken the argument question. So you'd be interested to know that there is one specific kind of question that we have, which is known as the assumption-based question. Assumption-based questions. Okay. Now, in these, you have various questions in this particular category of questions itself. You have various categories, one of which is weaken the argument question. Now, a good 60% of the questions that you will get in the exam, in the critical reasoning questions, 60% of it are assumption-based questions. And weaken the argument questions are the most commonly seen question. And a lot of people struggle with this question type, and which is exactly why I have chosen to tackle this particular kind of question. If you figure out the small little traps and typical patterns that you see in these questions, solving these questions become that much easier, and the chances of you getting much higher a score in all the critical reasoning questions just becomes much greater, right? That's a whole focus behind us focusing on weaken the argument questions today. So today we're going to look at the logical side of it. We're not going to go into strategy and stuff like that, but we're going to look at the logical strategy that we need to follow when we're looking at weaken the argument questions. We are also going to solve several official weaken the argument questions to understand the typical kind of patterns that you see in weaken the argument questions on the GMAT. Now, there are a lot of weaken the argument questions that you will see in general, on the internet. But the GMAT has very specific patterns. And when we are prepping for the GMAT, it's very important for us to focus on the patterns that you see on the GMAT, which is why we're going to be looking at some official questions today. And we're going to try to understand the logic that we need to follow as we try to solve this question. And what we're also going to do as we look at each question is we're going to try and identify what is a typical pattern that you see emerging. What is it, the typical trap that the test setters throw away? The sooner we recognize what the traps are, the sooner we can identify the options that are not the answer, the sooner we can eliminate those options and get to the option that is the correct answer. So identifying the typical the patterns and the traps are extremely important so that we know how we can quickly eliminate options and get the answer. I hope all of you know, in case you don't, let me tell you, that every single verbal question on the GMAT will have 5 options. This is the multiple choice exam where you have 5 options, but there's only one definitive correct answer. Okay. What we want to try to do is get to the correct answer as quickly as possible. Where critical reasoning questions are concerned, you have about 2-ish minutes to get to the answer. Ideally, you can, hopefully try to get it done sooner than that, but you should technically try not to take more than this. What we want to try and do as we tackle the questions in the exam is try and get rid of the incorrect options as soon as possible. And then, usually you're going to be stuck with 1 or 2 options. Those of you who've started your prep will surely, relate to what I'm saying. When I say it's almost always you have, look, I'm stuck between one option or the other option. I don't know which one it is. So our job is within the first 30 seconds or so, maybe even lesser if you can, try to get rid of those options that are easily eliminated. That is what we're going to focus on also today. We're going to try and understand which are the options that we can easily get rid of and which are the options here you're not so sure about. I'm going to hold on to that and come back to it later. That's the kind of process we're going to follow, be it weaken the argument question or any critical reasoning question that is presented. Okay, so that's what our agenda is for today. Okay. As I said, I don't want to make it a very class and strategy and all that stuff. I want to make it a more interactive and a more logic-based session. So let's just imagine a scenario for us to better understand what weaken the argument questions are all about, what is expected of us in a weaken the argument question. Let's just imagine a scenario that has been presented. Okay? All right. I hope you're with me. I hope you're all willing to put your imagination caps on so that you can figure out what needs to be done next. Imagine a scenario where you have a close friend called Sam. Okay, Sam, it's about 11:45, let's say, at night, and you're ready to go to bed. Maybe you've decided to watch a movie or series on Netflix, and then you get this phone call, and there's Sam on the other line, and he's saying, "Look, I've been arrested." And you might go, "Oh my God, what's happened?" You want to find out the details, and then you get to know that somebody called Tom has been murdered, and Tom was murdered using Sam's gun. Right? This is the information that you've got that has been told to you on the phone. And you know that Tom is murdered and Sam's gun has been used. And that's why the police have taken him away. They've arrested him because they've decided, they have come to the conclusion that Sam has murdered Tom because Sam's gun was used to kill him. This is the scenario that has been presented. Okay. And why has Sam called you? I mean, what's the point of him calling you? Okay, let's put in one more imagination. Imagine that you're alone. Okay, that's why Sam's called you, because he's in trouble. He's been arrested by the police and he needs you to help him. Okay, now you are a lawyer. Now Sam's going to be brought in front of the judge. It's a court of law, and you are his lawyer. What are you going to try to do? You are naturally, because you're his lawyer, you want to prove that he's innocent. Okay, this might not be possible to show that, to prove that Sam has not murdered Tom might not be possible, but if nothing else, you want to show that Sam has not necessarily murdered Tom. Okay, you want to make the judge feel some kind of a doubt. Maybe Sam is not responsible for this after all. What are the points that you would put forward? If you were the lawyer, what are the points you would put forward in a court of law to show that Sam has not necessarily murdered? Let me start. Okay, I will probably say that Sam's gun was stolen. Okay, and I will say, hey, here's the FIR. My gun was stolen about a week or so ago. I don't have my gun with me. Sam doesn't have his gun with him anymore. And here's the proof that he has registered this complaint in the police. This information, if I present it to the judge, or the jury or whoever will suddenly make the judge or jury feel, if Sam didn't have the gun with him in the first place, maybe Sam has not necessarily murdered Tom after all. So this is one thing probably as a lawyer I would put forward. Anybody else? You want to give it a go? Try out. Maybe you can tell me on the chat. What else, if you were a lawyer, can you think of something that you would put forward to show that Sam has not necessarily murdered Tom? What do you think? I'm waiting to hear from you on the chat, those of you who've joined. Okay, let me try one. If you're typing, please go ahead and type. We can look at that as a third point. I would probably also say, hey, look, Sam has an alibi. Sam's girlfriend had come over last evening to his house. And at the time when Tom was murdered, the police have figured out that he was murdered at approximately 9 p.m. At the time he was murdered, Sam and his girlfriend were together. And she's going to, be the witness to say, hey, I was with him. He couldn't possibly have gone anywhere to kill anybody. So this piece of information also shows that, hey, maybe Sam has not necessarily murdered Tom after all. One more. The last one I'm going to leave for you. What do you say? What is one more point you could put forward that, will help you show that Sam has not necessarily murdered? Maybe you can bring up a topic like, I could say something like Dan had threatened Tom. There are like 10 people who saw Dan in the public come and threaten Tom, telling him that he's going to kill him. So suddenly this makes me feel, hey, maybe it's not Sam who has gone and killed Tom. Maybe it's Dan who has done it. All of these points will help us show that Sam has not necessarily murdered Tom. Okay, I probably may not be able to prove that he hasn't, but this is going to raise some kind of doubt. Congratulations. That's exactly what weakening the argument is all about. Where you are looking at information from the outside, there'll be 5 pieces of information given to you. That is, assumptions that are going to be given to you. You have to see which one of these pieces of information help you show that whatever has been concluded, this is the argument. Okay, this is the conclusion. Whatever has been concluded is not necessarily true. That's it. You don't need to know critical reasoning. Even if you're somebody who hasn't really started your prep, you're not sure what critical reasoning is, you're not sure about the strategy, you don't know about the question types, no problem. Okay. The beauty that, or the advantage that you have where the GMAT is concerned is the one question type that is the most common in the GMAT exam is one that is the most absolutely logic based. So now you know what weaken the argument questions are all, and you are ready. You know all that you need to know to solve weaken the argument questions. Okay. There are 3 things though that I would like all of you to keep in mind when you're tackling a weaken the argument question. And keeping these 3 things in mind, you need to be like a horse with blinders on. You're not going to let yourself stray and look left or right. Keep your focus on and keep these 3 things in mind. You need to simplify the information given to you. I've just given you some information here. All of this is data. Okay. What you need to do is simplify the data as much as you can. What is the data? Sam has been arrested. Sam's gun used to kill Tom. Therefore, Sam killed Tom. Okay. I want to, and no matter how big your argument is, you need to focus on simplifying the information given to you. Focus on what you're expected to do. What am I expected to do? That is the biggest requirement in any GMAT question. You need to have your focus sharp. Even tomorrow, after you've gotten you finish with the GMAT, you finish with your MBA, your job as a consultant will be to have your eye on the ball. Okay, what is it that I'm expected to do? I am expected to look for an option that helps me show that this is probably not true. So whichever option I look at, I'm going to ask myself, hey, does this option help me show this is not true? If it's information talking about this or that, it is not relevant, I'm going to eliminate. Elimination is your friend. The GMAT is an exam of elimination. Don't expect that the correct question is going to jump out at you, right? So it's very difficult for us to get the correct question, immediately identify what the correct option is. But what we need to focus on is figuring out what is not the correct option. There are various patterns you see. The more you prep, the more practice you do, the more analysis that you do. That's more important than anything else. You will realize that there are these typical options that the test setters place in front of you that you know is not the answer. So elimination is your friend. The GMAT is not an exam of selection. It is an exam of elimination. Okay, that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to look at a few questions. All right, I'm going to give you 2 minutes per question and then some. Anybody needs a little more time, you can always ask me for more time. But let's stick to 2 minutes. All right. I would like you to look at the question. All the questions we're going to look at today are weaken the argument questions. Simplify the argument first. Be clear about what is the conclusion that has been drawn in the argument. Why are we doing this? We need to be clear about what the conclusion is because we have to show that whatever has been concluded is not necessarily true. Okay. That's what our agenda is. Let's start. Here's your first question. I'm going to give you exactly 2 minutes. Time starts now. Okay, you have about 30 more seconds. Those of you who've come up with an answer, maybe you can put it up on the chat. At the most, you're wrong. Come on, give it a go. Okay, 10 seconds, everyone. For those of you who decided on an answer, I'd love to know what your answer is. You can put it up on the chat. Okay, let's look at the question. The question says, which of the following, if true, casts most doubt on the production manager's conclusion? This tells us that there is a conclusion in place and the product manager has concluded something. Over here, we can very clearly see that the conclusion is mentioned over here in the last sentence. Keep in mind that the conclusion need not necessarily be in the last line. It can be anywhere in the passage, which is why it's very important for us to trace the flow of the information given. But here, right now, we know this is our conclusion, right? The product manager therefore concluded that, here it is, the new process did produce a cost saving. So I have all this data that's been given to me. And based on this data, what has been concluded is that the new process has brought about cost saving. I've simplified my argument. Now I need to be very focused on what am I looking for. We saw this already, right? I've simplified it, and now I'm going to focus on what I'm expected to do. I am expected to find an option that tells me that this relationship is not necessarily true. So I'm going to look at every option and ask myself, Does this show me that this relationship is not necessarily true? If I'm not sure, I'm going to hold on to that option. Please don't be in a tearing hurry to eliminate, because there are a lot of traps that the test setters will throw your way. One very common thing, a lot of people, especially those of you who've started prepping, you end up saying out of scope and then you go and eliminate an option. Please don't do that. Stop and ask yourself, how is this particular option affecting my argument? Can you see this? Which of the following, if true? This tells me that none of these options are going to be mentioned here. These are new assumptions that have been brought in, and we have to consider it. We've assumed it's true and see if this is going to help me weaken this relationship. Let's look. Option A tells me in the cost reduction project that eventually led to the trial of the new process, production managers had initially sought cost reduction of 50%. So my argument tells us that there was a 20% reduction. They had hoped for 50%, but they only got 20%. But in the end, what is the relationship saying? That the new process brought about cost saving. Even if it was only 20%, this fact tells us that this relationship is true. I'm looking for an option that says this relationship is not necessarily true, which means this is not my answer. Those of you who chose option A, not your answer. Okay, Kevin, you say C, let's check. B says, analysis of the trial showed that the cost reduction during the trial was entirely attributable to a reduction in the number of finished products rejected by quality control. Now, this looks really good. This seems to tell me that something else is the reason for cost saving. So this is a very typical pattern that you see in the GMAT critical reasoning, especially assumption-based questions, where the conclusion will tell you that X has caused Y. One way to weaken this argument is by showing that maybe something else has caused Y. If something else has caused Y, the probability that X has caused Y suddenly goes down. So option B seems to be telling me that whenever I get a bunch of options, our strategy ideally should be, look, if there's any option that requires some thinking, look, hold on to it, I'll come back to it later. I know that in the first 30 odd seconds, I want to get rid of as many options as I can. I'll come back to the one that requires thinking. C. While the trial was being conducted, production costs of the factory for a similar product also showed 20%. Okay, I'm going to need some thinking. I'll come back to it later. Option D is telling me that although some of the factory managers have been arguing that the product is outdated and ought to be redesigned, the use of the new production process does not involve any changes. See, this is just talking about generic information. They're saying that the new process, I will not need to change, it will not change the finished product in any way. This is in no way affecting my relationship. So I know this doesn't. Option E also seems to be telling me that the cost of the materials used is the same in both the processes. So that also is not really telling me anything about whether the new process did not necessarily bring about cost saving. This is also out. The choice is between B and C. We need to always aim to do this. Try and get rid of as many options as you can that don't work. And the ones you need to do some thinking about or that seems a little complex, hold on to, will come back. We've come back to B and C. Now B, while it seems to say that the number of finished products rejected by quality control, that is the reason for the analysis of the trial tells us that the cost reduction was entirely because of this. So they're telling us that there is some other reason for this, but if you look at the option carefully, it says analysis of the trial of the new process. So they're saying this is a typical pattern where they're saying, why is it that X has caused Y? Why is it that the new process has brought about cost saving? Because in the new process, the number of finished products that was rejected had reduced. That's why. So this is a very common pattern you see. I am not interested to know why X has caused Y. I am looking for an option that says maybe X did not cause Y. Okay, which is exactly what C is doing. Kevin, you're absolutely right. What option C is telling me is that, hey, look, Y has happened. Cost reduction has happened for a similar product, but X was not used. So cost reduction seemed to have happened even though the new process was not used, which indirectly tells me, hey, there was some other reason because of which cost saving has happened. And it is not the new process. So if there was some other reason, even though they've not specified what that some other reason is, it tells me maybe it is not, which is why option C is. Now, see, a lot of students are very, very focused on figuring out what is the correct answer. Of course, that is the final aim of the game. But it's very important for us to focus on why are the incorrect options incorrect. Because it's when we do that analysis that we understand these patterns, and it helps us understand that, hey, this I can quickly eliminate. This one, for example, immediately tells me this is not the answer. I know this is not the answer. I know this is not the answer. These patterns help me go about a little faster. Good, Kevin. I'm glad that, you were stuck between two options, but you finally went and chose the right option. So I'd like you to also see, Kevin, this is a great place for you to stop and analyze. Hey, why did I choose C? What is it that why did I eliminate option B? It's also important for us to check. Did I eliminate the option for the correct reason? Okay, great. Let's look at one more. Here we are. 2 minutes once again. Time starts now. Okay, we have about 10 seconds. Anybody who wants to give me your answer on the chat, please go ahead and do that. Kevin chooses B. It was, you were left between B and E. Okay, let's have a look. Okay. Now, what I want to point out right now is I've had a lot of students who tell me, oh, this question is very difficult, etc., etc. It's very important for us to understand that what the GMAT does is it always presents real life scenarios. They are trying to check, are you somebody who has the aptitude to solve problems? Okay. So whatever scenario is presented to you, it's going to be extremely relatable, extremely real life scenario. So instead of just reading a question like a question to be solved to get a score, just imagine it as a real life problem. A lot of students find it difficult. I have actually brought this in just to understand, try to visualize the problem. These are the rings that they're talking about, where these cans are in between these rings to carry them. And they're talking about how animals get stuck in it and stuff like that. So try to imagine, try to visualize the scenario. So it becomes a little easier for you to solve the problem. The more you can do this, be it reading comprehension, be it critical reasoning, any question type, the easier it becomes for you to come up with a solution. Because all of us, most of us are logical beings and we can figure it out. Okay. So now they're telling us that there are these plastic rings that hold six-pack beverages cans together and they pose a threat to wild animals. They get stuck in the discarded ring and suffocate as a result. No, that's what suffocation means, where they can't breathe anymore. So what these guys have done is they've come up with a new plastic that disintegrates after 3 days exposure to sunlight. So it's going to disintegrate, not going to be a problem. Based on that, they say, therefore, once we complete the switchover from old to new plastics, the threat of suffocation that the plastic rings pose to wild animals will be eliminated. Here is my conclusion. I'm going to once again remind you, in weaken the argument question, the conclusion is the most important thing, because you're trying to find an option that says this conclusion is not necessarily true. So I'm looking for an option that says the threat of suffocation that plastic ring poses to wild animals will not necessarily be eliminated. Okay, it's a good idea if you want to even write this down, because you know what happens is, as you go from option to option, you kind of lose track of what you were looking for, kind of lose focus. So it might even be a good idea for you to write this down, so you can, you have your North Star kind of. Let's check. Option A says the switch over to new plastic rings will take at least 2 more years to complete. Okay, so this is telling us more information about how long it will take. And how long it will take is not going to help me show that this threat of suffocation will not necessarily be eliminated. This is out. Option B says that after you've switched to the new plastic rings, a large number of old plastic rings will persist in most aquatic and woodland environments. Now this is saying that, hey, you guys might have come up with this fancy new plastic that disintegrates in 3 days and stuff like that, but there's a lot of the old stuff that still remains. Now, this information is telling me that the threat of suffocation that the old plastic rings pose, will not necessarily be eliminated. Looks good. I'm going to hold on to this. Okay. Please do not fall in love with options where you've convinced this is the answer. What happens to a lot of students, I'd also like to talk about that as we have these sessions, is what is the common trap a lot of people fall for? Hey, they decide B is the answer and they kind of give a cursory glance to the other options, and you probably might have the actual answer somewhere else. So just keep an open mind. B looks good, but I'm going to look at C, D, and E also. C says the new plastic rings are slightly less expensive than the old rings. So this might tell me that business-wise, this is a good deal. Now, this is yet another very common trap, not necessarily in this particular question, but a trap nevertheless, where the test setter might present an answer option that by itself will look like a great idea. Or, it might seem logically very sensible, or it might appeal to your common sense. Just because it is a good business idea, or it is commonsensically correct or logically correct, that does not mean this is the answer. Okay, this is where I said you have to keep your focus very sharp on what am I expected to do. This might be good, but it is telling me nothing about the threat of suffocation not necessarily being eliminated. It's about cost, no relationship whatsoever. Option D is talking about the fact that these rings, now see, a lot of people choose option D as the answer. Let's look, okay? The new plastic rings rarely disintegrate during shipping of beverages, because most trucks that transport canned beverages protect their cargo from sunlight. Fine, this is talking about what will happen as it is being transported. But once it's been transported, once the cans have been removed from the rings and the rings have been disintegrated, this information is talking to you about what happens after that. So this looks really good to a lot of candidates, but this is not really helping me either. Okay. Option E says the new plastic ring disintegrates into substances that are harmful to aquatic animals when ingested in substantial quantities by them. Now, Kevin, now you told me you chose B over E. Now let's look at why is not the answer. You're right, E is not the answer. The conclusion is talking about the threat of suffocation, where suffocation is, you get entangled in it. It gets stuck around your neck. Like you can see this poor little albatross probably. It has it stuck around its neck and it's suffocating. It can't breathe. This is talking about when ingested in substantial quantities, something harmful, some toxic that's going to kill it because of the toxicity. Okay, that is not our scope. When I say scope, I mean what is our focus? Our focus is suffocation. So while this looks good with regards to death of animals in general, our focus is suffocation and not ingesting and dying because of ingestion, which is why E is not the answer, B is the answer. Kevin, I hope that's the reason why you chose B over E. Please let me know, because, like I said, sometimes even though you're stuck between B or E and you still have a 50% chance of getting it right, and then you've gone and chosen B for whatever reason, you need to be clear about the reason Because let's suppose you've eliminated E for the wrong reason. And the same logic is carried forward to another question. You may not get that question. So let me know. I hope this is the reason why you eliminated option. Meanwhile, let's look at another. Here we are. Time starts now. Okay, 10 seconds. Hope you've come up with an answer. Kevin, great to hear that that's the logic you use. And I'm really thrilled also that you went back and read the conclusion. So sometimes, it's just this one odd thing which will end up making you choose the wrong option. So I'm glad you went and, what can I say, cross-checked what the conclusion is saying. Okay, let's look at this. Kevin, what do you think the answer is for this? The others, if anybody else wants to give it a go, what do you feel is the answer for this? No? No problem. While you think about what you think, what might be the answer, let's look at the question itself. So we know this is a weaken the argument question. Okay, we've got Kevin choosing D. Let's check. Now, again, a very relatable scenario where it says study of marriage is fine. Many of you might not be married, but even if you are in a relationship or, you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a partner in some form, this is a very relatable scenario. That's exactly the kind of stuff that GMAT throws your way. Okay? So they're saying that, hey, look, if you have, okay, C and D, let's check. If there's a relationship happening and the partners don't sleep and wake up at the same time, if their sleeping and waking cycles differ from those of the other partners, reveals that such couples, that means the couples who sleep and wake at different times, share fewer activities with each other and have more bitter arguments than do couples in a relationship in which both partners follow the same cycles. Okay, thus. So these kind of keywords tell you the conclusion is right there. Mismatched sleeping and waking cycles can jeopardize a marriage. Okay, so they're saying X once again is causing Y. Okay, this is a very common thing. Causal relationships are something that you see very, very often in assumption-based questions. When I say assumption-based questions, for those of you who are already well into your prep, strengthen, weaken, identify the assumption, evaluate the argument, all of these are assumption-based questions. So these kind of causal relationships are something that you see very, very often. So far, we've already seen that one way in which we can weaken a causal relationship, we just saw it in the question that we saw about, let me just go back here, where we saw that new processes brought about cost saving. We saw that X caused Y, and we realized one way in which we can weaken this is by finding a Z that causes Y. So that is one alternative that we have. So let's keep our minds open When you see a weaken the argument question and you see a causal argument pattern, let's keep our mind open that, hey, maybe there is a Z that is causing Y. Let's check. Okay. Now, each option, let's have a look. Option A says married couples in which both spouses follow the same sleeping and waking patterns also occasionally have arguments that can jeopardize the couple's marriage. So a lot of people feel that option A is the answer. Hey, it's not just the guys who sleep, at different times, even the other guys. Okay, now they also do. That doesn't necessarily mean that this relationship is not necessarily. They're saying that some other bunch of people also don't. This is a very, very common pattern. Okay, let me just give you an example. If I say smokers, no disrespect to any of the smokers, yeah. If I say smokers experience breathlessness, okay. If I say smokers experience breathlessness, does this fact mean non-smokers do not experience breathlessness? What do you guys think? If I say smokers experience breathlessness, does that mean non-smokers do not experience breathlessness? Doesn't make sense. I mean, non-smokers might experience breathlessness. Maybe they have some congestion issue or they have a cough or whatever. So this is a very typical pattern where the test setter will bring you the exact opposite scenario and tell you, hey, this weakens your. But this is doing nothing to my relationship. A is out. B says that the sleeping and waking cycles tend to vary from season to season. This may very well be true. Okay. Maybe like in the winters we sleep longer, in the summers you wake up early, etc. But the whole idea is they should be doing it together. And they're saying if you don't do it together, you have a problem, you have discord in your marriage. So the fact that it varies has no relationship whatsoever to this particular condition. B is out. C and D is what most of you seem to have said. Even Manish says D is the answer. Let's check. According to a recent study, most people's sleeping and waking cycles can be controlled and modified. Okay, thank you for the information. Good to know. But this information that it can be controlled or modified is doing nothing to tell me that X does not necessarily cause Y, that a mismatch sleeping and waking does not necessarily bring about problems in the marriage. E is also. Let's look at C and D. C says, the individuals who have sleeping and waking cycles that differ significantly from those of their spouses, means the two partners have different waking and sleeping cycles, tend to argue a little with colleagues at work. So I can see why this is really tempting, but now the first thought is, what's the connection? But that's also dangerous because a lot of people tend to eliminate this saying this is out of scope, that the colleagues at work is out of scope, but we need to always ask ourselves, how does this piece of information affect my causal argument? Fine, they may tend to argue little at work. That doesn't mean that mismatched sleeping and waking cycles do not jeopardize a marriage. That's what I'm looking for. So this is actually out of scope. This has no relationship whatsoever with this relationship over here. Yes, the answer is D. Let's look at what's happening. How is D the answer? We've just seen that if you have a causal relationship that says X causes Y, the one option that can weaken it is a Z that causes Y. There's no Z here. Now, if I have a Z that's causing Y, this would be called an alternate causation, where I have an alternate reason. But another way in which I can weaken an argument is by having a reverse causation, where I'm saying, hey, look, X has not caused Y has caused X. That's exactly what D is saying. They're saying, I'm sure, again, this is also very relatable. Now, if you are unhappy already, you and your partner are already having trouble. I'm not going to sleep when you sleep. I'll wake up after you wake. These kind of things, this kind of behavior in unhappy marriages, they express their hostility by deciding to sleep and wake up at different times. So suddenly when I say this, hey, look, it's not because they have different waking and sleeping cycles that they have a problem in their marriage. They have a problem in their marriage. That's why they have different waking and sleeping cycles. Suddenly, this relationship, see, all you have to do in weaken the argument is bring about a sense of doubt. This is weaken the argument. It's not destroy the argument. Okay. So you just have to make the person feel, maybe not. That's all that you're expected to do. And that's exactly what he is doing. Well, we're doing really great. Let's try one more, a slightly trickier one. Here we are. Same 2 minutes. Time starts now. So Kevin, yes, I'm just going to, interrupt and say, yes, this was a little more difficult a question. Reverse causation is not something you see very often. You see it in slightly tougher questions like you saw in this one. And most people tend to think, what's a connection? So, but I'm glad you got it right. Great going. All right. What do you think? This one also, Kevin, is along the same lines, slightly trickier. So I'll wait to hear from those of you who are attempting. What do you think is the answer? I know you'll be stuck between one or the other, but give me a definitive answer. And also let me know what you felt was the other option that kind of got you confused. What do you think? Okay, while I wait for an answer, let's just look at the argument. Which of the following, if true, most seriously weakens the reason? We've already, it's already been established that we're looking at weaken the argument question. But what we recommend here at Prackverbal is to follow something called the 5-step method. Okay. Before we get into the actual question, I just want to talk about this very. This is something that we have seen work with thousands of students, because this is something that all the stuff that we talk to you guys about is stuff that we've taught thousands of students and we've seen the effect of it. So this is not something I'm just throwing from the top of my head. This is something that actually works. It's a great idea to start off by reading the question stem. All right. The reason we have seen this works is because when I know that it's a weaken the argument question, I know in my mind that there is a very clear conclusion. I need to figure out what the conclusion is. So as I read my argument, I have a more focused approach to my reading. Okay. If I read the argument, blah, 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 I've read everything. It's taken me 30 seconds to figure out what I've read. And then I read the argument and then I read the question stem. This is called a question stem. And then I read the question stem and I realize, oh, it's weak in the argument. There's a conclusion here somewhere. Let me go search for the conclusion. I'm going to go read the passage again. Time is of the essence where the GMAT is concerned. I need to find ways, even a couple of seconds shaved off here and there plays a great role. So please start off by reading the question stem. Make it a habit. Even if you know you're going to be reading or trying out weaken the argument question, go ahead and read and make sure that this is what the answer is. That's the first step. Second step is where you're simplifying the argument. I know that it's weak in the argument. I know there's a conclusion. I'm going to figure out what the conclusion is. I'm going to simplify the conclusion as much as I can. And then I'm going to focus on what am I looking for. Okay? Now they're telling me that the population of sea otters You're going with option A. Okay, great. What do you think, Manish? Let's see what the argument says. In the late 1980s, the population of sea otters, okay, sea otters, in the North Pacific Ocean began to decline. All right. Of the two plausible explanations for the decline, that is one is killer whales, right? That is increased predation by killer whales or disease. These are the two probable reasons for this decline. Of these two, disease is the most likely. So they're saying disease is the reason for the decline. All right. After all, and then they give me some more information. Please understand, no information on the GMAT is in vain. Every word is thought out to the last T. Okay? So if they're giving you some information, this is going to be relevant. After all, a concurrent sharp decline. There's a sharp decline. Okay. In the population of seals and sea lions was almost certainly caused by a population-related disease. So there was a decline in seals and sea lions. That was because of a population-related disease, which could have spread to sea otters, whereas the population of killer whales did not change. Okay. So now they're telling me the conclusion. Now, see, now you'll notice over here in this particular argument, the ones that we saw so far, you had a thus and a therefore and stuff like that. There was no such thing. We have to figure out the conclusion. We have to simplify. The conclusion is that disease has caused the reduction in sea otter population. Okay, that's it. I'm going to hold on to A. Okay, since most of you seem to think A is the answer, let's just look at the answer. Option B says there is no indication that substantial numbers of sea otters migrated to other locations from the North Pacific in the 1980s. Now look at this complex language that they used. This is a very, very common pattern in the GMAT critical reasoning questions, where the answer options, the test setter will create an answer option in such a way that it's a little difficult to figure out. You'll have to read it. So let's try and simplify what they're saying. There is no indication that a large number of sea otters migrate. So let me now put it in a different way. They've told us two probable reasons. Okay. There is one more reason that the sea otter population could have declined. They could have migrated. They've not told this to us in the argument, in the data as such, but we know this is one probable reason. What is B telling us? This is also not the reason. Okay. So they're telling us this is not the reason. They've also told us this is also probably not the reason. This is actually strengthening the argument that, hey, maybe it is disease that caused the decline after all. Now, yet another pattern we've just seen. Weaken the argument question. Almost always there is going to be one option that strengthens the argument. Strengthen the argument option. There's almost always one option that will weaken the argument. So we need to watch out for it. For some reason, maybe it's the stress of the exam, people end up choosing the exact opposite. So this one doesn't work. It is strengthening the argument. I am looking for an option that says disease is not necessarily the reason that caused this decline. Okay. All right. Let's look at C. Option C is telling us that along the Pacific coast of North America, sea otters were absent from many locations where they had been relatively common in former times. So they're saying, hey, look, they're just probably on the one hand, you could say this is just what a lot of mentors call as information about this. They're just telling me what I already know. Okay? That they've not been around for a while. This decrease has been around, has been happening for a while now. So this is not talking about the reason. This is just reiterating the fact that we already know that there's a reduction in the population. This is not my answer. Okay, so not my answer. Option D. Now, a lot of people choose option D. Let's see why. Following the decline of the population of sea otters, there was an increase in the population of sea urchins, which are the sea otters' main food source. Now, sea otters eat sea urchins. No, the sea otters have gone down. Naturally, the sea urchin population will go up. This is a logical scenario. What, a person will read this and say, no, obviously, if the predator is not there anymore, there are more of these guys left. A lot of people choose this option because this seems so logically obvious to them. This might be a logical conclusion that the reduction of sea otters brings about an increase in sea urchins, but is this helping me show that disease has not necessarily caused a reduction in sea otter population? No. This is what I meant when I say we need to keep our blinders on and be very focused on what are we expected to do. We are expected to find this. So this is logical, but this is not my answer. Now, option E is saying that the North Pacific population of seals and sea lions cover a wider, so they're talking of seals and sea lions. And they seem to cover, they're seen in greater parts of the North Pacific than sea otters. This is still not telling me about the decline of the sea otters. This is out. Why is A my answer? A lot of people say, hey, Nitha, how is A the answer? We're not talking about killer whales, we're talking about disease. Now, what is A doing? A is trying to show us that, hey, maybe it is this that is responsible. If we can somehow say that maybe it is killer whales that is responsible, this suddenly makes us think maybe it is not disease that is responsible. Let's look at the option. Killer whales in the North Pacific usually prey on seals and sea lions. I told you, no information is in vain. They've given us this information already that there was a sharp decline in the population of seals and sea lions. Okay? So these killer whales prefer to have seals and sea lions for dinner and lunch. But when the food source is scarce, they will seek out other prey. Scarce is, when they don't have, when there aren't enough seals or sea lions to kill and eat, they'll go looking elsewhere. Where else do they go looking for? Sea otters. So this is telling us, now again, a lot of students say, hey, this doesn't mean that the killer whales kill the sea otters. Yeah, sure, I can't prove that. But this has brought about a doubt in my mind. If seals and sea lions are not available for killer whales to eat, maybe these killer whales have been going to the sea otters because they're available. And that must have brought about. This tells me maybe it's not disease. Maybe it is the killer whales that is responsible because they don't have seals and sea lions anymore because there's been a sharp decline. My answer is option. Really good question, which really makes you stop and think how, how I need to be really careful before I say outer scope and eliminate things. The answer is option A. Great going. What we've done today is, it's just been 1 hour and we've covered some really good questions with a lot of patterns and a lot of traps. That was the intention. Trust me when I say that over the years of teaching, I can tell you this for a fact, that it's not the number of questions in your prep that matter. It is the value and the quality of the analysis that you do, like we've done today, where we've broken down every argument. We've looked at the key points that help us understand what is important in an argument. We've figured out what we're looking for, and we've been very clear about looking out for exactly that. And we've analyzed why every incorrect option is incorrect. We've held on to options that may probably be the answer. This kind of strategizing, this kind of focused work, this kind of analysis is what is more important. I'd rather you do 5 questions and you analyze in this kind of detail to understand why a particular option works and why another option doesn't, than do 10 questions and not really. Okay. So we're going to have more of these sessions every week, as a matter of fact. I hope more of you will join, because the more we learn to analyze in this manner, the more we can understand the patterns, the easier it will become for us to eliminate options and get to the correct answer. So today we've managed to understand the logic behind weaken the argument questions, and we've solved quite a few weaken the argument questions based on time. We've focused on 2 minutes, we're going to get it done. And we've looked at several patterns. If you go back and think back at what we've spoken about, you'll see how various patterns have emerged in just a few number of questions that we saw. So great, that was a fabulous session. I had a great time. I hope those of you who are watching, I hope you will take all the learnings from today and apply it in the questions that you see. And, do this analysis and try and ask yourself, hey, what have I learned from this? If the answer was option A, but I went and chose option B, why did I eliminate option A? What is the trap I fell for when I chose option B? I hope you do that kind of analysis, because that is what you need to ace your GMAT. Thank you everyone for watching till the very end. My name is Nitha, and I'll see you very soon. Bye everybody.